name is Nichole, and my background is as a computer scientist, learning scientist, and I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to create better learning environments, both physical and technical, for youth. And today I want to talk about, particularly since this is a design conference, how we can think about design as being more of a voice, a powerful voice, in creating these learning environments. And so if you think about roads, is there an easy path straight ahead, or are we at an intersection where we have to make decisions? And I think for many in education, one of the things that we fail to understand when we're trying to create new educational opportunities or reform education for kids, we're constantly thinking that what it is about curriculum. So if we can just get the standards right, if we can, make the day longer, if we can figure out how to assess teachers. And so what I want to explore a little more is how can we think about not just making the responsibility to school, but how can we think about making the responsibility of trying to create these straight paths as opposed to these constant intersections? How can we make this a goal and responsibility of all the communities that people are a part of? In our work here in Chicago, where we've been fortunate to be funded by the MacArthur Foundation, we've tried to begin to tackle this issue of how to create these learning spaces by saying it's not an educational issue, it's a learning issue. And it's not owned by the school, it's not owned just by the home, and it's not owned by the community. It's owned by all of these places. And if we think about everyone working together, then maybe we can create these learning opportunities for kids. And so if you think about these three spaces where kids are, they're at home in their religious organizations, their communities, and their friends. That's disconnected from what takes place in school, and oftentimes it's very disconnected from what takes place in the civic institutions. We did a study with over 200 Chicago high school students and asked them how often had they gone to any of the civic institutions beyond field trips. I think it was like 4 or 5%. They never contemplate going into these organizations, even though when they talk about things they want to do, things they want to learn, all of these places have programs, opportunities for them. So the challenge we have is all these places are disconnected. So what I learn in one place isn't connected to the other. In such a way that here's a map, we sat down with a 12-year-old and asked them, what do you do in school, after school? What are the things that you're doing? What things take place at home, in your local community, and which things take place in your school community? And asked him to make connections. Where did he see that these two things were connected? So for him, even though what he was learning, let's say from music, wasn't necessarily connected to what he was doing in music at school. So he had these completely different worlds. So I think there's a very easy design challenge here to figure out some of these connections, to figure out how can we connect learning from one to another. And so I want to give you an example of two ways that we've attempted to do it. And we've done it around the area. We focus mainly on digital media, partly because we believe that we know everyone's technology is ubiquitous. So if we think about a third grader today, we know, regardless of what the economics are, they are going to be using technology in every aspect of their life. So if technology is ubiquitous, then the ability to understand and create with digital media is going to be an essential literacy for everyone. And if it's done well, it's possible that a child's interest can move across all these different spaces. So I might learn poetry at the library and after school program. I might learn robotics someplace else, but I can actually bring all of that back into my home. So we're here in Chicago trying to create this with an organization called Hive, where we're trying to link 20 different civic organizations together and to try to get them to share learning and to share kids across spaces, which is actually a very hard challenge. And so two of the issues that became the most critical for students is this notion of access and visibility. One is, am I even aware of what's available? And second, if I'm aware of it, is it accessible? So we did a little test where we said we took the 20 organizations and we looked at they gave us a list of their programs. And we then said, how can I find these programs? So how can I go online to find them? It took us over 120 searches to complete the list. There was no one stop in Chicago for a kid to find out what's going on, what are the opportunities for them. Even most organizations didn't even have their programs listed on their own place. So then if it's visible, is it accessible? So the issue of access and accessibility from the perspective of students became a critical issue for us to address. The other one that became really important is audience. Gone are the days where audience of your teacher is being the only audience matters. If you extend the audience to peers, the community, and to others, then there's a motivation to iterate, right? Because I want my work seen, I want to develop some social capital. So, and I can see, and what's equally as important, I can see your work. So if I see someone's work sitting next to me, and I see, they can do this, then that might motivate me to think that I can actually do it. And if you think about it, for those of you who have kids, ask them when's the last time they saw someone's work in their class. If you ask them what a good essay looks like, how do they know? So the lack of audience has been a big barrier that many students talk about. The second, which is, I think, which is the most important for me, is the notion of identities. So what are the identities we're asking students to take on as we push them down this, this pathway towards education? So for me, I have my identities of my parents who were going to college, so I knew that this wasn't an option, I was going to actually do this. But for many of my kids we work with, this isn't. So there's identities creating, like I have a role model such as Michael Jordan, but it's not just having a role model, it's actually also having places where you can play. So what happens when you have places to practice, there's many things that take place. One, people can spectate, you can see what's possible, you can practice, you can perform, and you can level up, all in the same place. So any basketball court, tennis court, golf course, at any one point in time, you have people doing all these different things, which enables you to see what's possible and also motivate you to take on. And along with that, from a learning standpoint, you have to have all kinds of coaches, drills, feedbacks, and things like that. I'm gonna focus on that. And what we see when we bring together the ability to have practice spaces, places to play, along with role models, is that people begin to put in the work. So instead of these young kids worried about being, the NBA player right now, first they're just worrying about, can they practice, can they play, can they make a shot, can they dribble. As they get older, they go out and then they begin to perform, and so they're going to other places where they're performing against each other. Then if you get better, you're playing in games. And hopefully some will make it to the professional, but the reality is you've probably developed a skill that you're going to continue to do. So even when you realize, as I did when I didn't get any taller after the 4th grade, that professional sports weren't going to be for me, you still play and do what it is that you've learned. So one of the challenges in schools is that we haven't figured out how to make the end product of school something that's valuable for kids to do along the way. Even though we know it is, and those are skills we use on a daily basis, we haven't positioned it to kids in a way that works for them. So here's 2 examples of where we try to do it with working with kids on the south side of Chicago. One is, and context for this, we decided to take, this is around 4 years ago, we decided to take a set of digital skills. Can kids create any of these digital artifacts? And we wanted to compare the kids to a group of kids in Silicon Valley pre and post. So we worked with some colleagues at Stanford and we did a pre-test at the beginning of 6th grade. What can our kids do in terms of these digital skills? And then, of course, we did our intervention. And then at the end of 8th grade, what can they do? The beginning of 6th grade is what everyone would expect. 96% of the kids on the south side of Chicago have fewer digital experiences than the kids in Silicon Valley. But then what we created is in-school digital media. We created after-school clubs, online social networks, and we brought in mentors, real artists who actually, for a living get paid to do all these digital things. And that showcased to kids what's possible. And then they decided to put in the effort and to do the work. And so at the end of the 8th grade year, 84% of our kids had more digital experiences than the kids in Silicon Valley, and had more depth of experiences than the kids in Silicon Valley. And when they talked about what was the difference, they talked about it was that actually being able to see what others were doing and being able to have role models. Here's an example of just one of the young men whose parents used the service as a babysitting service in some sense. He was there every day after school. His interest was in anime, so he did anime videos, he did anime shoes, he did anime video games. He also did robotics, he did music, and he created his own games. So for him, everything digital became the vehicle to represent himself, but it also got him social capital that made him like one of the it guys in the school. These are just an example. It's not something that takes place overnight, and we call these technobiographies, where we track what happens over time. And what we begin to see is that kids take on roles, and they begin to have multiple people that play a role in their life. So here's just a don't expect you to read this at all, but you can see the different colors. The tan is what the kid was doing at home. The light blue is what they were doing in after school, the green is what they were doing in school, and then the gold is what was taking place in the community. So everywhere they went, there was an intersection of digital experiences that had meaning to them. And equally important, up to the top here, all those little lines are the people who came into their lives, the role models and the mentors who helped them develop these literacies. So that worked great in a couple of schools on the south side of Chicago, but that's not scalable. And what happened is when all those kids graduated from that school, they went to good high schools, but their digital literacies were not as relevant when they went to high school. So we had to say, what can we do? How can we continue this work? So we said, well, then what are the basketball courts for the high school kids? And so we worked with the Chicago Public Libraries to create an organization called YOUmedia, which is open to any high school teen, is right down this, is about 2-3 minutes down the street, that they come into. It's high school only, 9th to 12th grade, come in and they can, there's a recording studio, laptops, mentors where they can develop all the digital skills that they want to develop. And one of the interesting things happened. There's over 500 teens a week who come from all over the city. They pay their bus money and they come. And one of the most important things they talk about is that they have a place. And I want to harp on this word place because growing up where schools were the place and everyone hung out at schools, I've always was thinking, well, you have a school, your high school, you have schools, why not hang out there? In a place like Chicago, high school is not the place to hang out. When school's over, you leave. And so how often the kids talk about just needing, if they can have a space where they can do positive things, then positive things will actually happen. So this is one of 4 that are in the city of Chicago. There's 30 more coming across the country. And some design things we did, we intentionally designed a space for performances. So there's always kids performing, which as new kids come into the library, they can figure out, hey, what's going on? To the middle, we have a space where we put little things to tinker with, keyboards out so you can figure out if you want to do something. And all the way to the end are places where you can actually take lessons and classes that come place. So in one point in time, it's a very noisy place, but a lot of learning's going on. And actually it has book circulation that is more than the local libraries. And these are just snapshots of what it looks like. Kids from all ages, all socioeconomic status, all different schools come here together as a place for them to be creative. And they've actually produced a lot of good work that comes out of here. I want to show you a clip of an example of work that takes place here. But what I want you to, the reason of showing it is really to focus on how kids are talking about themselves and how they perceive themselves in this work. And this is work where the kids were reading the book of Mercy by Toni Morrison on their own, their choice, as part of the One Book, One Chicago, and creating their own digital representations of that.
It was just great to see all these students come together across medium, work with different mentors, and the work that they've been producing has been amazing.
When I was reading the book, I read the line, "As I live and breathe, a slave by choice." And this picture kind of embodies self-enslavement.
It was just a dream, kind of, to be able to read a book that you wouldn't normally read, and then it has so much of an effect on you that you can put your own musical emphasis on it.
Salted tears dancing and scrapes sting like ringing slaps. They dance to the rhythm you pound into drums.
Skin stretched taut over dismantled jaws and collarbones. We dance to music.
Bright lights, dark days.
I wrote a poem as if I were the character Florence, and so he's gonna be singing he's gonna be singing sort of lyrics that I wrote. I wrote the poem, and then afterwards there's a little song, so he's gonna be singing that as well as producing the beat most likely.
Like Master told Mama, it'll hurt at first, but give it time. You will love the
product of the raping. My mama named me Florence so I wouldn't wither under the harshness of a man. There's a strength in my decrepitness, the freedom of your pedigree couldn't muster.
It's been cool to see how much can come from one book and how a vast array of work has come from this one book.
I'm going to stop there. And so really the importance of the roles. They all talked about themselves as I'm a poet, I'm a rapper, I'm this, I'm that. And so those identities are meaningful to them and that they're willing to put in the work if we show them what the work is that they need to do to get to that particular point. if we begin to think about how we can create these environments, these learning environments where kids not only are taught the content and the knowledge, but they're developing the dispositions, the identities to become the citizens, the digital citizens, or the citizens in general that we need them to be. It can't just be the responsibility of schools. It has to be the responsibilities of schools, the communities, the home, all linked together and all supported in ways that I think if we really take what we understand about design, understand what are the affordances, what is the mapping from the content and the skills we need them to learn in the school day, and how does that make sense if we talk about the roles that they need to take on. And so we're looking and seeking out partnerships with designers to help us take this to the next level, because it can't be something that is just in the hands of educators. Thank you.